The bullets came first, AK-47 rounds tearing through the mud brick walls like they were made of cardboard. Then the screams. Radio chatter fractured into desperate bursts of code words and coordinates as the extraction zone collapsed into chaos. 2 miles outside Kandahar province, what should have been a precision extraction had become a killing field. Lieutenant Commander Alexandra Morgan pressed her back against the remnants of a blasted doorway, blood not her own darkening her tactical gear. 3 men down, 2 critically wounded, 1 missing. The mission was compromised before they'd even reached the target. Thunder 6, this is Dagger 2. Request immediate dust-off. Grid coordinate 349er. Her voice stayed level even as tracer rounds stitched patterns in the darkness around her. The response from command crackled through her comms, distorted but unmistakable. Negative Dagger 2. Area too hot for extraction. Secure position and await further orders. Alexandra's jaw tightened. She knew what await further orders meant when you were surrounded with wounded. It meant you weren't the priority anymore. Through her night vision, she could see Staff Sergeant Rivera's chest heaving in irregular bursts, blood pooling beneath his body armor where the ceramic plate had shattered. She wouldn't leave him not like this. Her fingers found the detonator in her vest pocket. The backup plan. Always have a backup plan. Thunder 6, be advised. Executing Protocol Blackfish. No response, just static. As she dragged Rivera toward the fallback position, Alexandra caught movement in her peripheral. A shadow where none should have been. Not Taliban, the profile was wrong. American kit. Someone from her own unit, Lieutenant Walters. Before she could signal, she saw him deliberately adjust the dial on his radio, switching channels away from the team frequency. The realization hit her like ice water. This wasn't a mission gone wrong. It was betrayal. The fog crawled low across Havenport Bay, 18 months later, thin and fast, sliding over the sand like it was trying to beat the sunrise. Visibility sat in that gray middle ground, not quite night, not yet morning, when the air tasted of salt and worn leather, and an idle Black Hawk's blades ticked faintly in the distance like a metronome no one thought to stop. Naval Special Warfare Training Center, Havenport, stood as a testament to Cold War military expansion, established in 1987 as one of the primary SEAL training facilities on the East Coast. Its reputation was built on broken bodies and forged minds, the crucible where America's most elite maritime special operators proved themselves worthy of the trident. Lieutenant Commander Alexandra Morgan crossed the compound with her gear already packed tight. No escort, no greetings, just a matte duffel hanging from one shoulder and her name already printed in sharp black type on the assignment board, Morgan A. Lead Instructor, Combat Integration Rotation 2. Her NWU Type 3 uniform was bare of flare, no colorful patches, no visible insignia beyond the silver oak leaves of her rank. Her hair was secured in a regulation bun, tight enough to be practical, but never rigid enough to suggest she was trying too hard. She didn't bother with sunglasses even under the harsh coastal glare. Her steady eyes saw everything just fine. Behind the admin trailer, 2 instructors leaned against a shaded cart. One took a drag from a cigarette, the other didn't bother hiding his stare. That hurt. Well, yeah, Morgan. Came out of some joint command deal. Nobody's sure what kind. Figures. Probably another paper genius they're testing in the field. Let's see how she does when it's not theory. They laughed like the verdict was already in. Inside the mess hall, whispers rippled ahead of her like a wake before a ship's bow. A few glanced at her chest where a SEAL trident might have sat. There was none, just the regulation insignia. Simple, lawful, unadorned. Alexandra didn't reach for coffee, didn't seek out conversation. She reviewed the training schedule on her tablet with the focus of someone dismantling a bomb. Each tap precise, each review thorough. They're sizing you up already. The voice came from behind her, graveled by age and authority. She turned to find a man in his late 60s, his uniform indicating his retired status, but the bearing of a career officer still evident in every line of his posture. His weathered face carried the permanent tan of someone who'd spent decades in the world's harshest environments. Colonel William Hargrove, he introduced himself, extending a hand that bore the calluses of a life spent in service. Retired. Now I just hang around as an advisor because they can't figure out how to get rid of me. Alexandra accepted his handshake with a precise grip. Lieutenant Commander Morgan. I know who you are, Hargrove said, a hint of amusement in his eyes. Your file doesn't say much, but what it does say is interesting. My file isn't available to training staff. Her voice remained neutral. It isn't, he agreed, but I still have a few friends at the Pentagon who owe me favors from Desert Storm. Alexandra's expression didn't change, but something shifted in her eyes. Recognition. You served with my father. Captain Jonathan Morgan, one of the best tactical minds I ever encountered. We ran operations together during the Gulf War. Hargrove gestured toward the window where the training grounds stretched toward the shore. This place has changed since then. Not all for the better. Alexandra followed his gaze. Change rarely is better or worse. Just different. That's diplomatic of you. Hargrove lowered his voice. But we both know that's not why you're here. She turned fully toward him, now her full attention landing on him with the weight of a tactical assessment. Walk with me, he said. Not a request. Outside, away from the mess hall's curious eyes, Hargrove led her along the perimeter fence. His gait was unhurried but purposeful, the walk of a man who had learned that rushing rarely improved outcomes. 3 incidents in the past year, he said without preamble. 2 female candidates removed from the program after safety incidents. 1 male officer who raised concerns about training standards suddenly transferred to Guam, all under the watch of the same training cadre. Alexandra didn't appear surprised. You've been keeping tabs. I've been trying to gather evidence, Hargrove corrected, but everything looks clean on paper. Accidents happen in SEAL training. Equipment fails. People get hurt. The system is designed to push human limits. But you don't believe they were accidents. I believe there's a difference between testing someone's limits and ensuring they fail. Hargrove stopped walking, turning to face her directly. Your assignment here wasn't random, was it? Alexandra's silence was answer enough. Whoever sent you, Hargrove continued, they picked the right person, but you should know what you're walking into. The men you'll be dealing with, they're not just resistant to change, they believe they're protecting something sacred. The SEAL tradition. Their version of it. Hargrove's eyes narrowed against the morning sun. Watch for Sergeant Ryan Blackwood. 14 years in multiple deployments to Afghanistan and Iraq. Distinguished marksman with the MK-13 Mod 7. Decorated, respected, and absolutely convinced that women have no place in special warfare. Alexandra nodded once. And his circle, Mason Turner, former Army Ranger who transferred to the Navy, follows Blackwood like he's gospel. Hargrove paused. There are others, but those 2 are the core. They're smart, Lieutenant Commander. They know how to make problems look like unfortunate accidents. The morning briefing gathered on the terrace at Euro 700. The commanding officer, Colonel Harrison, spared Alexandra 5 sentences. 4 procedural, 1 dismissive shrug disguised as formality. Lieutenant Commander Morgan will oversee field integration drills for the next 6 weeks, he announced to the assembled instructors. Her rotation will center on asymmetric combat leadership exercises. Her previous deployments are sealed under joint operations, and all authority granted is verified by Central Command. No clapping, no polite nods, just the dry hum of silence. Alexandra stood there, posture, even chin-leveled hands relaxed at her sides. Her gaze swept the group, not searching for approval, just taking mental inventory. One instructor leaned back as if expecting someone taller. Another gave a half-smile when she didn't acknowledge him. But the third short-cropped hair, square-jaw name tag reading Blackwood held her stare a beat too long. Not curiosity, not doubt. It was the cool calculation of a man deciding whether she could be broken. Alexandra said nothing. No questions, no reaction, just quiet composure. When the briefing ended, she turned toward the eastern field to walk the training course alone. No clipboard, no aid. The same 2 instructors from before now lingered by the lockers, their eyes tracking her movements. Doesn't talk much, one muttered. Doesn't need to, the other replied with a smirk. New officers always think silence makes them strong. Let's see how long that lasts. Simulation 3 after lights out, Blackwood said quietly as he passed them. And just like that, the test began. By late morning, the fog had burned away from Havenport's coast, leaving the sky a sharp, endless blue. Heat shimmered off the sand, stinging the eyes. A full unit of trainees stood in formation, breath ragged under weighted vests. Some bent over after the last drill, others clenched their jaws, praying she wouldn't call another round. Lieutenant Commander Alexandra Morgan walked the line with calm precision, stopwatch in hand. The crash of waves behind her pretended at peace, though every heartbeat on that beach was pounding. "Front row," she said evenly. "Bear crawl to the shoreline and back. Timer starts the moment your elbows hit the sand." A few groans slipped through the ranks. Before the order could take hold, a voice cut across the beach. "You running this like a beach yoga retreat, Commander?" It was Sergeant Blackwood, arms crossed near the water trailer, sunglasses low on his nose, radiating calculated boredom. His uniform looked inspection-ready, boots gleaming like he polished them more than he trained in them. Alexandra didn't turn. "Excuse me," I said. Blackwood repeated louder, letting the recruits hear, "This pace, these drills. Half these kids did tougher warm-ups in high school wrestling." Nervous laughter rippled through the line. Alexandra pivoted and approached him, unhurried, stopwatch still dangling at her side. She stopped just outside arm's reach. "What's your proposal, Sergeant?" He tilted his head, smiling. "Maybe give them something real. Something that separates leaders from tag-alongs." He gestured toward the obstacle course visible in the distance. "Unless we're handing out participation trophies this week." Silence. Even the waves seemed to pause. Alexandra looked down the line of recruits, then back at him. "Sergeant Blackwood," she said clearly, "you're assigned as support for the next 3 days. You'll run shoreline reps with row 2, 10 laps full packs. Each time someone drops you, double back and escort them." The smirk faltered. "That's not, it is now," she interrupted, her tone unbroken. "Unless you'd like to challenge my authority in front of recruits during active rotation. Shall I note your objection for the oversight board?" The pause that followed was surgical, clean, precise. Blackwood blinked, squared his shoulders, and gave a tight nod. "No, ma'am." She didn't thank him, didn't acknowledge the shift in tone, just turned back toward the formation. "First row, go." As the recruits dropped into motion, sand spraying from boots and elbows, Blackwood watched her pass. Not a twitch on her face. She hadn't raised her voice once, but somehow every trainee now looked at her differently. "She thinks she runs the place now," he muttered to Turner beside him, then quieter before walking off. "We'll remind her this isn't some classroom gig." Turner gave the smallest nod, enough to say, "Tonight then." The sun hung low over the Atlantic, casting long shadows across the deserted beach. Alexandra sat alone on the pier, a tactical tablet balanced on her knees, reviewing personnel files that most commanding officers would never access. Her security clearance opened doors that even Colonel Harrison couldn't unlock. She swiped through Blackwood's service record. Distinguished as Hargrove had said, multiple commendations, 3 Purple Hearts expert marksman certification. But there were gaps, mission reports with redacted sections, performance reviews that seemed suspiciously positive given noted infractions. Someone had been protecting him. The question was why. A memory surfaced, unbidden but precisely recalled. A forward operating base outside Korengal Valley, 2011. The air thick with dust and diesel exhaust. Alexandra, then a junior officer, crouched beside a wounded Marine as Taliban fire rained down around their position. She dragged him 200 meters to safety, applied a tourniquet that saved his leg, then returned to the fight. Later at the debrief, her commanding officer had commended the team, but failed to mention her actions specifically. When she inquired privately, his response was cutting. "You did what any operator would do. Don't expect special recognition for doing your job, Lieutenant." She hadn't wanted special recognition. She'd wanted equal recognition. The light on her tablet pulsed, pulling her back to the present. A message from an encrypted channel. "Simulation 3B has been flagged for maintenance review. Equipment irregularities noted. Proceed with caution." No signature, but she knew it was from Hargrove. Alexandra closed the tablet and stared out at the darkening horizon. Her father had died in a training accident during Desert Storm. The official report cited equipment failure, a faulty oxygen regulator, during an underwater demolition exercise. She'd been 15 when they'd folded the flag over his casket. 22, when she'd discovered the redacted portions of the investigation. Some accidents weren't accidents at all. She rose from the pier, muscles fluid despite the day's exertion. As she turned toward the barracks, she caught sight of Blackwood and Turner standing near the equipment shed. Thompson, one of the newer recruits, listening intently as they spoke. Their conversation ceased the moment they spotted her. Blackwood offered a mocking salute. Beautiful evening for a swim, Commander. Hope you're rested for tomorrow's rotations. Alexandra merely nodded and continued walking, but her senses had already cataloged every detail. Thompson's nervous posture, Turner's hand resting too casually on the shed's padlock, Blackwood's eyes tracking her movement with predatory focus. They were planning something, and they wanted her to know it. Overhead, the lights in the instructor-ready room buzzed, one flickering weakly above the weapons rack. Blackwood leaned against a steel table, unwrapping a protein bar with deliberate calm. A muted TV looped heat map footage from a past drill, figures darting across obstacles. Turner sat opposite him, boots up on a crate. You really going to do it? Do what? Blackwood replied without looking up. Don't play dumb. I saw your face on the beach. Blackwood took a slow bite, chewing like it didn't matter. She embarrassed me in front of 50 recruits, followed protocol like it was a weapon. He finally met Turner's eyes. You think she can just stroll in here with her sealed file, skip the dirt work, give orders like she's Moses and we all salute? She's Command's latest experiment. We're the backbone. That means no one climbs above us without earning it here. Silence stretched thick with shared memory. Both men had survived the crucible of SEAL training, broken bones, nights without sleep, psychological evaluations that cracked stronger candidates. Yet somehow this calm, unreadable officer had stepped into a top slot without a scar to show for it. Just rattle her, Turner said finally. No damage. Shake her pedestal a little. Blackwood nodded. No bruises, no witnesses, just pressure. His smile tightened. Pressure shows what people are hiding. He pulled up the obstacle course map on the wall screen. Simulation 3B night rotation. No helmet cams after 2100 standard rule. He tapped the cargo net tower. This rig's still on soft inspection. Swap one of the mid-beams with a dummy bar. It won't show up on the checklist. She drops a few feet, gets a scare, backs off, learns her place. Turner rubbed his jaw. And if she doesn't, Blackwood's smile was razor thin. Then we make sure she does. Just then the door creaked open. Recruit Thompson stepped in, still damp from Drill's helmet tucked under his arm. You wanted to see me, Sergeant. Blackwood's tone softened, practiced. Yeah, come in. Sit. Thompson glanced at Turner, then eased onto the bench. Got a simple task for you tonight, Blackwood said. Shadow the tower sequence. Help reset the rig after each climb. Routine safety observation. Thompson frowned. I thought the tower was cleared for solo runs. It is, Blackwood replied smoothly. But new leadership means extra oversight. We don't want her thinking we're unprepared, do we? Thompson shook his head slowly. No, Sergeant. Good man. Blackwood reached into his duffel, pulled out a small toolkit, and slid it across the table. Swap the bolt on the mid-beam during the first climb. Just loosen it halfway, no one will notice. It won't break, just drop a little. Enough to spook her. Thompson's fingers tightened around the edge of the bench. And if she gets hurt... She won't, Blackwood said smoothly. Turner added, we're not monsters. You want her respect, right? She won't respect you unless she earns it the hard way. That line stuck. It always did. Thompson nodded once, hesitant but obedient, and took the toolkit. When he left, the door shut with a hollow thud that lingered. No one leads before they crawl first, Blackwood said, cracking his knuckles. Outside, the floodlights poured over the obstacle field like artificial daylight, bleaching out every shadow. Generators hummed low, boots crunched over the sand. Night training at Havenport always ran tight, one rotation, minimal oversight, strict comms control. Lieutenant Commander Alexandra Morgan stood near the signal flag. Her voice didn't need volume. Every word landed sharp. Tonight's drill is live contingency simulation. Cargo net breach wall, low crawl evac drag. Instructors shadow from quadrant 2. Blackwood, Turner, and Thompson stood behind the recruits, already geared up. No cameras tonight, no observers, just a run by the book. On paper, everything looked routine, but Alexandra's instincts told her otherwise. She swept the course with her eyes. The gravel looked slightly off. She made a note of it, said nothing. The first phase went smoothly. Crawls, vaults, rope swings. A few trainees stumbled. One clipped a shin. Nothing unusual, but the inconsistencies began to stack. One rope cut half an inch shorter than spec. A grip post wobbling under load. A timing mat flickering mid-run. She cataloged it all silently. At the tower base, she called out, "Next wave. I'll take lead on the climb. She grasped the rails and started her ascent. Precise hands, steady boots, no wasted motion. Halfway up, a sudden jolt. The mid-beam snapped with a sharp metallic pop. She dropped 6 feet down the incline, hit hard on her shoulder, and rolled. It wasn't enough to break bone, but the impact stunned her, sent white flashes across her vision. She braced herself to rise, but they were already there. Blackwood crouched, first tone feigning concern. "You all right, Commander?" His grip on her arm was just a bit too tight. She didn't respond. Turner stepped in next, smirking. "Shouldn't be climbing cold. Liability move." Then his boot nudged her side, not quite a kick. "Need a medic or just some air?" She sat up slowly, steady. "I'm fine." Blackwood leaned closer. "Just checking, Commander. Making sure you can handle the gear out here. It doesn't care about resumes." She stayed silent. That's when the tone shifted. Blackwood offered his hand to help her up, but as he pulled, his elbow slid into her ribs, control precise. Not enough to knock her down, but enough to hurt. She didn't flinch. Turner moved next, pretending to misstep. His legs swept low, catching her off balance. She hit one knee, caught herself, eyes locked on both men. Thompson stood frozen at the edge of the circle, watching. Blackwood's voice came again, calm and cutting. "This is how we learn, Commander. Under pressure." Pain pulsed through her side, but she rose. 3 against 1. No cameras, no witnesses, except there was. Her eyes flicked once toward the tower's upper junction box, a small maintenance sensor, motion activated, required after the last safety audit. They'd forgotten it was there or never knew. But she had. She'd walked the course on day one, checked every sensor, every backup, every buried failsafe tucked in the margins of official inspection reports. They stepped back, laughing like it was all harmless fun. No shouting, no bruises that would show, just practiced pressure disguised as discipline. It was plausible deniability wearing a uniform. What they didn't notice were her eyes. Steady, cold, counting each step, memorizing every motion. Alexandra Morgan didn't survive joint operations by reacting. She survived by studying, by remembering. By 2200, the generators wound down and the floodlights faded one by one, until only the sodium lamps at the far edge of the compound threw soft gold across the gravel. The recruits were gone. The instructors had filed their reports. And no one mentioned what had happened. Alexandra walked the full course alone, her shoulders stiff, her ribs flaring each time she breathed deep. Her flashlight swept across the spot where she'd fallen, a shallow dent in the dust half covered in boot prints. Hers tangled with theirs like the marks of an unfinished fight. She crouched, tracing the damaged beam. It still hung loose, sliced clean through the reinforcement screw. Not wear, not age. Intent. A soft click of her tongue cut the silence before she straightened and kept walking. In her quarters, the air conditioner hummed steady. She peeled off her jacket carefully. A bruise bloomed across her ribs, purple fading to yellow at the edges. A thin cut ran along her shoulder where the gravel tore her uniform. Nothing that wouldn't heal. She pressed a cold pack against her side and sat at the metal desk. The tablets glow her only light. "Entry 2334 hours," she said quietly. "Training simulation 3B. Mechanical failure, mid-beam collapse. 6-foot fall shoulder trauma. Immediate response, 3 instructors. Blackwood first contact. Turner second. Thompson observer. No witnesses. Suspected manual interference." Her tone stayed flat. No anger, no tremor, just evidence. She stopped the recording, saved it under maintenance inquiry, then opened a blank note and wrote 3 words at the top: names, motive, pattern. Outside, a patrol truck rumbled by, headlights slicing through the blinds. She leaned back, eyes on the ceiling. A memory surfaced uninvited, another desert, another ambush. The same betrayal disguised as teamwork. Different field, same principle, never react when they expect you to. Never fight where they can bury it. She closed her eyes, breathing through the pain until her pulse matched the rhythm of it. By 2330, she had rewrapped her ribs, replaced the ice with gauze, and stood before the mirror. The bruise looked vicious. Her stare did not. "They think I'm their lesson," she murmured to her reflection. A faint, humorless smirk tugged at her lip. "They just became mine." She switched off the light, left the tablet charging, and lay down fully dressed, boots still on. Outside, Havenport slept. Inside, she didn't. The next morning, sunlight slid over the base in thin amber lines glinting across asphalt and barracks windows. The drill yard buzzed early boots, striking pavement metal, clanging shouts echoing, but the admin wing stayed calm. Lieutenant Commander Alexandra Morgan entered with a rolled logbook under one arm and her sling bag over the other. She moved as though nothing had happened. Back straight, stride, even face unreadable. If anything, she looked sharper than the day before. Her name still hung second on the instructor board right beneath Blackwood's in the maintenance office. Chief Wilson was hunched over a monitor, a coffee cup steaming beside him, a torque wrench tucked behind his ear. "Morning, Commander," he said without looking up. "Heard the course ran hot last night." She stepped in lightly. "Noticed a few oddities. Tower beam failed mid-run. That got his attention." He turned, brow furrowing. "That beam's reinforced. It shouldn't have gone." "Can I see the log?" "Sure." He tapped keys. The screen blinked to life, pulling up the entry under Course Structure, Tower Unit 3B. The monitor displayed a trail of system edits. Manual calibration override 1937 hours. User ID Instra Blackwood. Safety lock disengaged 1937 hours. Secondary override logged by Instra Turner. Chief Wilson blinked. "Huh, didn't expect those." Alexandra's tone was neutral measured. "No," she said slowly. "Those overrides shouldn't even be possible outside technician access. Someone must have used an old terminal we never wiped." She nodded once. "Could you send me a copy of that log?" He hesitated. "You thinking of filing a report?" "Just reviewing my own training data," she replied evenly. "But if I need the files later." Wilson sighed, already transferring the data. "Copying now." She accepted the drive with a curt nod, turned and left without another word. Before heading to the canteen, she stopped at the operations hub, a small room with 3 terminals, one always idle during morning rotations. Logging in under her command clearance, she accessed the motion sensor archives for Tower Unit 3B. Timestamp 2241 to 2254 hours. 13 minutes of footage. The file was grainy infrared but clear enough. 3 figures circling a fourth. Coordinated. Deliberate. She copied it to the same drive, wiped her session history clean, and stepped back into the sunlight as if she'd only checked the day's forecast. Down at the canteen, Blackwood sat with Turner and 2 others, trays scattered, empty wrappers tossed aside. Their voices were low, but arrogance had a way of carrying. "Give it time," Turner muttered. "The ones who act like steel always crack." "Especially when they have never been tested," Blackwood replied. Across from them, Thompson sat hunched, poking at his breakfast silent. Blackwood caught his eye. "You did good," he said. "Smooth run." Thompson didn't answer. His food was untouched. "She hasn't said a word," Turner noted. "No report, no medical visit, nothing." "It's done," Blackwood said, draining his water bottle, tossing it in the bin. "That's the thing about officers like her," he said, starting to walk toward the field. "They don't bark." He smirked. "They wait." He didn't realize she already had. Just after noon, a new announcement appeared on the board outside the ops hub, printed and pinned without commentary. "Live evaluation. Instructor assessment at drill time. 1600 hours. Course simulation 3B. Field rotation audit. Lead demo team in STR. Blackwood in STR, Turner trainee, Thompson observer LT. CMDR Alexandra Morgan." No message. No warning. No fanfare. But by 1400, nearly every instructor not deployed hovered near the quad. No one had been ordered to attend. They were just drawn by the shift in the air. Blackwood stared at the sheet like it was bait. "Observer," he smirked. "That's it." Turner gave the paper a tap. "Standard evaluation. Probably wants to see her little reforms under pressure." Blackwood grinned, pulling on his gloves. "Then let's give her a show." By 1600, the sun had tilted west, stretching shadows across the course. A mobile command van now sat at the field's edge, cameras mounted high. Inside, 2 SEAL instructors manned the monitors, one syncing the wireless feed to a large outdoor display behind the staging tent. Off-duty recruits gathered behind hazard tape, forming a silent arc. It wasn't just curiosity, it was tension. Everyone sensed something was about to break. Blackwood, Turner, and Thompson stood at the course entrance. Helmets, secure earpieces, checked posture, perfect. Lieutenant Commander Alexandra Morgan arrived without a sound. Same desert fatigues, no medals, no clipboard, just a slim data tablet in her right hand. Her left shoulder was still stiff beneath her uniform, the bruise beneath healing but visible if one knew where to look. She gave a single nod to the technician beside the display. Load sensor map, she said calmly. Run dataset simulation 3B 2 nights ago. The screen blinked to life. A real-time schematic of the obstacle course flickered onto the display. Digital overlays, timestamps, user logs, all aligning in neat, merciless order. Blackwood's name appeared first, then Turner's. Each action tagged and recorded. Beam override. Safety lock disengaged. Eyed verification. The screen pulsed with evidence. Not dramatized, just undeniable. A ripple moved through the watching crowd. Whispers spread, then fell into uneasy silence. One senior instructor stepped forward, squinting at the data before glancing toward Blackwood. Realization settled across his face, not fury, just the quiet understanding of someone recognizing something rotten too late. Another instructor turned away, entirely unwilling to be seen near what was unfolding. Blackwood froze mid-motion, half into his harness. Turner's hand stalled on his helmet strap. Thompson looked like the air had left his body. Then Alexandra's voice came through the comm feed, steady, controlled. You will now rerun the drill exactly as you did that night. Same rig, same sequence, same teamwork. Blackwood glanced toward her, searching for some clue that this was a warning, not an execution. But her face didn't move. No expression, no twitch, only calm precision. What the hell is this? Turner hissed. What's she doing? Blackwood's eyes stayed fixed on the red highlighted logs flashing his own ID. She's not doing anything, he muttered. She's just letting everyone else see. Behind them, the crowd grew. Senior officers, 2 commanders, a JAG aide in plain clothes watching, listening. Alexandra stepped off the platform, walking toward the tower until she stood just short of regulation distance from Blackwood. The logs don't lie, she said quietly, and neither will your next move. Then she turned toward the crowd, not to explain, not to accuse, but to let silence sharpen the edges. Because some takedowns didn't need fists. They needed facts, timing, and absolute surgical calm. The sun hung just above the horizon by the time the demonstration concluded. No one had spoken, no one had intervened. Alexandra had simply let the evidence play out in full view of the entire training command. Blackwood, Turner, and Thompson were escorted separately to the administration building, where Colonel Harrison waited with the JAG officer. Alexandra remained by the tower, watching as the crowd dispersed in subdued clusters. Only when the field had emptied did she allow her shoulders to relax slightly. That was quite a show, came a voice behind her. Colonel Hargrove approached, hands in his pockets, eyes on the tower where the damaged beam had now been replaced. Though I suspect the real performance is just beginning. Justice isn't a performance, Colonel. Isn't it? He smiled faintly. What you did today, that was theater with a purpose. You didn't just expose their sabotage. You made them face it publicly. She turned to face him fully. Men like Blackwood rely on shadows. They operate in spaces without witnesses, without records. I simply removed the shadows. Hargrove nodded slowly. Smart. But this isn't over. Blackwood has connections beyond this base, officers who came up through the ranks with him, who share his views on who belongs in special operations. I'm aware. Alexandra's voice remained neutral, but her eyes narrowed slightly. That's why I'd like to continue this conversation somewhere more private. 20 minutes later, they sat in Hargrove's modest off-base home. It wasn't what most would expect from a retired Special Forces colonel. No wall of medals, no tactical gear on display. Instead, the living room featured a carefully curated collection of artifacts from his deployments, a weathered map of Panama from Operation Just Cause, a desert camouflage scarf from Desert Storm, photographs of teams without names or locations. I've followed your career more closely than you might realize, Hargrove said, pouring 2 fingers of bourbon into a glass and offering it to her. Your father and I served together in 3 theaters. After he died, I kept tabs on his family, particularly his daughter, who seemed determined to follow in his footsteps despite every obstacle the system could throw at her. Alexandra accepted the glass but didn't drink. My father's death wasn't an accident. No, Hargrove agreed, his voice softening. It wasn't. He settled into a worn leather chair across from her. Neither was what happened to you in Afghanistan, the ambush that killed your team. Her face remained impassive, but her grip on the glass tightened imperceptibly. "How much do you know?" she asked. "Enough to recognize the pattern." Hargrove's eyes were sharp despite his age. "Your father questioned certain operational decisions during Desert Storm, particularly those that put politics above mission integrity. 18 months later, his oxygen system fails during a routine exercise. You report inconsistencies in mission intelligence after a failed extraction in Kandahar province. And suddenly your entire team is compromised. You think they're connected. I think there are men in our ranks who believe they are the true guardians of special operations." Hargrove leaned forward. "Men who will eliminate threats to their vision, whether those threats come from outside or within." Alexandra set her untouched drink on the table. "That's why I'm here. Not just for Blackwood and his cronies, for the network behind them." Hargrove nodded. "Then you'll need to be even more careful. What happened on that tower was just their first attempt. They were testing boundaries, seeing how you'd respond. Next time, they won't be so obvious. I'm counting on it." "You'll need allies," Hargrove said. "Chief Wilson in maintenance is trustworthy. He served with your father too, though he might not have mentioned it. And there's a medical officer, Sarah Daniels. She's experienced similar accidents during her tenure." Alexandra's eyes flickered with recognition. "The combat search and rescue specialist." "The same. She filed complaints about training safety protocols last year. A week later, her rappelling gear mysteriously failed during a demonstration. She survived with a broken leg and 3 cracked ribs. The investigation found user error." Hargrove's mouth tightened. "She's been sidelined to medical training ever since." Alexandra committed the name to memory. "Anyone else?" "Be careful with Thompson," Hargrove warned. "He's caught in the middle, but he has his own history with Blackwood. His brother was a SEAL candidate who died during Hell Week last year. Official cause exhaustion and drowning. Unofficial word someone tampered with his breathing apparatus during an underwater exercise." Alexandra's eyes narrowed. "And Blackwood was involved." "No direct evidence, but Blackwood was the lead instructor for that rotation." Hargrove studied her carefully. "Thompson joined looking for answers. Blackwood took him under his wing, protection disguised as mentorship." "Leverage," Alexandra murmured. "Precisely." Hargrove rose from his chair, moving to a bookshelf where he retrieved a small lockbox. "Which brings me to something you should see." He unlocked the box and removed a worn leather journal. "Your father kept detailed records of his concerns, missions, names, discrepancies. After his death, this was sent to me anonymously." He handed it to her. "I think whoever sent it was afraid to keep it themselves." Alexandra took the journal, her fingers tracing the cover with uncharacteristic tenderness. "Why show me this now?" "Because you're stirring the same hornet's nest he did." Hargrove's expression grew grave. "And because I need you to understand something fundamental about your opponents. They don't just fear women in special operations, they fear anyone who threatens their control over what the SEALs represent." He returned to his seat. "Never confront them where they're strongest. Never let them dictate the battlefield." Alexandra nodded, tucking the journal into her jacket. "I learned that lesson in Afghanistan." "Good," Hargrove leaned back. "Then you already know more than your father did." The next morning brought a heavy coastal rain drumming against rooftops and turning the training grounds to mud. Alexandra sat in the base medical facility, her jacket removed as Sarah Daniels carefully examined the bruising along her ribs. 2 contusions, moderate soft tissue damage. Daniels noted clinically, though her eyes reflected a deeper understanding. "Nothing broken, but you'll need to limit high-impact activities for at least a week." "Not an option," Alexandra replied. Daniels offered a knowing smile. "That's what I said too after my accident." She lowered her voice. "Hargrove told me you'd come by, said you might have questions about my rappelling mishap. Did you ever find proof?" "Nothing concrete." Daniels applied a cooling gel to Alexandra's ribs with practiced hands. "But I know my equipment. The primary carabiner showed microscopic filing marks too deliberate to be wear and tear. The investigation dismissed it when I pointed it out." Alexandra studied the medical officer more carefully. Daniels was in her mid-30s with the compact build of someone who'd spent years in the field before being relegated to a medical role. Her movements were precise, efficient, no motion wasted. "How many others?" Alexandra asked. Daniels glanced toward the door before reaching into her desk drawer. She removed a thumb drive and pressed it into Alexandra's palm. 8 incidents in 3 years, all women or minorities in advanced training positions, all dismissed as equipment, failure, or user error. Alexandra pocketed the drive, and no one connected the pattern. No one wanted to. Daniels began rewrapping Alexandra's ribs. The women involved were either transferred medically discharged or convinced to drop their concerns. The system protects itself. Not anymore. Alexandra's voice carried quiet certainty. Daniels finished the bandage and stepped back. Be careful, Commander. After my accident, someone accessed my personnel file. 2 days later, my civilian apartment was broken into. Nothing taken but my service records were scattered across my bed, just to let me know they could reach beyond the base. Alexandra nodded, absorbing this information. I'll keep that in mind. As she left the medical facility, Alexandra spotted Thompson sitting alone on a bench beneath a sheltered walkway watching the rain. He looked up as she approached, tension visible in his shoulders. Commander, he acknowledged, starting to rise. Stay seated, Thompson. She joined him on the bench, leaving appropriate distance between them. For several moments, they simply watched the downpour in silence. They're going to blame me, he finally said, voice barely audible above the rain. Are they wrong to? Alexandra asked, not accusingly, but with genuine inquiry. Thompson stared at his hands. I loosened the bolt. I knew what I was doing. He swallowed hard. But I didn't know about the rest, about them hitting you afterward. Alexandra studied his profile, bowing. Why did you agree to help them? He remained silent for so long she thought he might not answer. Then, my brother Michael, he died during Bud's training last year. I know. Thompson's head snapped up. How? I reviewed all training casualties before accepting this assignment. She let that sink in. Official report cites exhaustion and drowning during an underwater evolution. That's bullshit, Thompson whispered fiercely. Mike was the strongest swimmer in our family. Eagle Scout, junior lifeguard. He could hold his breath for 4 minutes. And yet he drowned. They said he panicked, that sometimes even strong swimmers freeze under stress. Thompson's jaw clenched. I didn't believe it. When I got accepted to the program, Blackwood sought me out. Said he'd help me understand what really happened to Mike. Alexandra waited, letting him continue at his own pace. He told me the training had been softened to accommodate diversity candidates. Said standards were slipping, that instructors were being forced to pass people who weren't qualified. Thompson's voice grew bitter. Said my brother died because someone changed the safety protocols to make them more inclusive. And you believed him. I wanted someone to blame. Thompson's admission hung between them. When I got here, Blackwood took me under his wing, showed me files, told me stories. Said women like you were pushing changes that got people like my brother killed. Alexandra absorbed this without visible reaction. Did he ever show you actual evidence? Thompson hesitated. He showed me reports with sections highlighted, training memos with policy changes. But did you ever see the full documents? The context? The silence answered for him. Alexandra leaned forward slightly. Thompson, did Blackwood ever mention why your brother's breathing apparatus might have failed? His expression shifted, confusion replacing defensiveness. What do you mean it didn't fail? He panicked. Are you certain? She held his gaze steadily. Because I've been reviewing incidents involving trainees under Blackwood's supervision. There's a pattern of equipment malfunctions during critical exercises. The color drained from Thompson's face. That's not possible. Blackwood was trying to help me find out what happened. Or he was ensuring you never looked too closely. Alexandra reached into her pocket and produced a small data tablet. She opened a file, a maintenance report from 14 months prior. This was filed 3 days before your brother's final exercise. It notes that 4 breathing regulators were flagged for irregular pressure readings, but were returned to service after Blackwood personally certified them as operational. Thompson took the tablet with shaking hands. This doesn't prove anything. No, it doesn't, Alexandra agreed, but this might. She pulled up a second document, a medical examiner's supplementary notes that hadn't made it into the final report. One line was highlighted, examination of recovered breathing apparatus, shows potential tamper marks on pressure release valve. Recommend further forensic analysis. The recommended analysis was never conducted, Alexandra said quietly. The equipment was logged as destroyed in a storage facility, fire 2 weeks later. Thompson stared at the document, his breath coming in short bursts. Why would he, why would anyone, to maintain control, to ensure that only those they deemed worthy made it through? Alexandra's voice remained steady, compassionate, without coddling. Your brother may have been collateral damage in a larger campaign, or he may have noticed something he shouldn't have. Thompson placed his tablet on the bench between them, his hands trembling too much to hold it. What happens now? That depends on you. Alexandra turned to face him fully. In 3 hours, there will be a formal inquiry into the tower incident. You can maintain Blackwood's version of events, or you can tell the truth. All of it. They'll end my career before it begins. Possibly, she acknowledged, or you might help prevent what happened to your brother from happening to someone else. She stood preparing to leave him with his thoughts. As she turned to go, Thompson called after her. Commander, did you know? His voice cracked slightly. When you let me help sabotage the tower, did you already know what I'd do? Alexandra paused. I knew someone would be recruited. I didn't know it would be you. She looked back at him, her expression softening fractionally. But when I saw you there, I recognized something familiar. The same look my father had in the last photograph taken before his accident, someone beginning to question what they'd been told. She left him sitting there, rain dripping from the overhang, decisions weighing heavier than any rucksack he'd ever carried. The debrief room was cold enough to sting. A stainless steel carafe of untouched coffee sat on the table like a forgotten prop. Across the wall, the pause log still glowed faintly. 1 red line, 3 names, 1 timestamp. Colonel Harrison stood at the head of the table, arms locked behind his back posture carved from authority. Beside him, Lieutenant Meyer Jag Observer had his tablet open, stylus motionless. Blackwood, Turner, and Thompson sat in a tense row. No uniforms now, just undershirts and nerves. Blackwood's leg bounced. Turner's jaw was rigid, trembling. Thompson sat still, hands flat on his thighs. Alexandra entered last, taking a seat opposite them. The bruise on her ribs throbbed dully beneath fresh bandages. Colonel Harrison didn't need to raise his voice. Lieutenant Commander Morgan has submitted digital logs, medical documentation, and a verified equipment trace. From Chief Wilson, all cross-checked by timestamp and operational access logs. He turned the screen toward them, replaying the sequence. The override. The safety lock disengaged. Blackwood's ID, then Turner's. Then silence. No malfunction, no fatigue failure, no miscommunication, Harrison said flatly. Blackwood opened his mouth, but Alexandra's voice cut through from across the table before he could speak. Miscommunication doesn't leave bruises in a formation pattern. Heads turned. She placed a printed report on the table in front of Meyer. The top sheet showed photographs, dark bruises, a compression wound, each marked with a timestamp, 0034 hours, simulation 3B. Meyer flipped through the pages silently and nodded once. Harrison looked back at Blackwood. Sergeant, you assaulted a superior officer during live prep rotation using premeditated sabotage in the presence of a witness. Blackwood's control cracked. She had it coming. Harrison's jaw tightened. Is that your statement? I mean, she came in like we owed her respect. She hadn't earned correction, Harrison interrupted, tone flat as steel. She came in with rank orders in the discipline you failed to model. He turned to Meyer. Your assessment, Lieutenant. Meyer cleared his throat. Article 92, failure to obey order or regulation. Article 93, cruelty and maltreatment. Article 107, false official statements. Article 128, assault on a superior commissioned officer. He looked up from his notes. This could result in court-martial with potential dishonorable discharge and confinement. The room temperature seemed to drop further. Turner's face had gone ashen. Harrison's attention shifted to Thompson. Trainee Thompson, do you have anything to add to the record? Thompson's throat worked visibly. He glanced once at Blackwood, then at Alexandra, before fixing his gaze on the table surface. Sergeant Blackwood instructed me to tamper with the tower equipment, he said, voice steadier than expected. He provided tools and specific instructions on how to loosen the bolt without it being detected. Blackwood hissed, You little sergeant! Harrison's voice cracked like a whip. One more word, and I'll add insubordination to the charges. Thompson continued, each word gaining strength. This wasn't the first time. There were other incidents, training accidents, designed to weed out candidates they didn't think belonged, specifically targeting female officers and minorities. He reached into his pocket and placed a folded paper on the table. This is a written statement about conversations I witnessed regarding my brother's death during Bud's training last year. Sergeant Blackwood personally certified equipment that had been flagged as potentially defective. Harrison took the paper without comment, though his expression darkened as he scanned its contents. "Lieutenant Meyer," he said finally, "prepare the necessary documentation for formal charges. Effective immediately, Sergeant Blackwood is relieved of duty. Discharge proceedings commence at 0800 tomorrow. Staff Sergeant Turner, accessory to sabotage, administrative separation recommended." Harrison's voice didn't rise, but the sentence hit harder than any shout. Then he turned his gaze to Thompson. "Trainee, you stood by initially but eventually came forward. Late but honest. You'll be pulled from this rotation. Your officer commission is rescinded. You'll receive an honorable discharge with option to reapply to a different service branch after 2 years." Thompson's throat moved once. He managed only a nod. "This incident will be reported to Naval Special Warfare Command with full documentation," Harrison continued. "A comprehensive review of all training accidents under Sergeant Blackwood's supervision will be conducted." He tapped the monitor. "Dismissed." Chairs scraped. No protests, no excuses, just the slow rhythm of consequence. Outside, the afternoon sun hung heavy behind the admin wing, stretching long shadows over the courtyard. Word had already spread. Instructors avoided Alexandra's eyes. Recruits straightened their posture at the far end of the field. Alexandra walked with measured calm. Blackwood passed her, not close, but close enough. She didn't flinch. He didn't speak. He just kept moving, shoulders tight, chin low, stripped of rank reputation control. And Alexandra kept walking forward. Evening settled over Havenport, painting the training grounds in streaks of amber and fading blue. The ocean wind softened. The base fell quiet as it always did after reckoning. Alexandra stood in her quarters studying her father's journal. Page after page of meticulous notes. Mission discrepancies, unusual orders, names that appeared too often in questionable operations. She recognized some of them from her own career officers who had risen to positions of considerable influence within Naval Special Warfare. A knock at her door interrupted her reading. She closed the journal and tucked it into her desk drawer before answering. Sarah Daniels stood outside, a medical bag in hand. "Thought you might need a check on those ribs." Her eyes conveyed the real reason for her visit. Alexandra let her in, closing the door behind them. "It's already happening," Daniel said quietly, opening her bag and removing a handheld scanner. She ran it methodically around the room, checking for listening devices. When she finished, she nodded once. "Clear." "What's happening?" Alexandra asked. Blackwood made 3 calls after the hearing. One to Captain Reynolds at 5th Fleet Command, one to Commander Westfield at SOCOM, and one to a blocked number routed through the Pentagon. Daniel's expression was grim. "All 3 have histories with the training issues I documented." Alexandra absorbed this. "How do you know about the calls?" "I have a friend in communications. She owes me." Daniel sat on the edge of the desk. "There's more. Blackwood's personal effects are being packed by a special detail, not standard procedure for administrative separation. And 2 files have been removed from the medical archives, both related to training fatalities from last year. They're sanitizing records," Alexandra concluded. "Exactly." Daniel's voice lowered further. "Whatever you kicked over, it's bigger than Havenport. They're mobilizing to protect something." Alexandra considered this information carefully. Or someone. She moved to the window, looking out at the darkened training grounds. "Tomorrow I need you to gather every scrap of medical data on training incidents under Blackwood's supervision, official and unofficial. I want tissue samples, equipment preservation records, everything. They'll block access. Not if we have authorization from a higher authority." Alexandra turned back to face her. "How quickly can Hargrove arrange a meeting with Admiral Patterson at Naval Special Warfare Command?" Daniel's eyes widened. "Patterson, that's aiming at the top." "That's exactly the point." Alexandra's expression remained calm, but determination radiated from her like heat from a sun-baked stone. "Blackwood and Turner are just the visible symptoms. We need to expose the disease." "They'll come after you," Daniels warned, "not just professionally, personally." "I'm counting on it." Alexandra's voice was steel wrapped in silk. "Because when they do, they'll make mistakes, and mistakes leave evidence." Daniel studied her for a long moment before nodding. "I'll contact Hargrove tonight. If anyone can get Patterson's attention, it's him." After Daniels left, Alexandra returned to her father's journal, flipping to the final entry dated 3 days before his death. A single line stood out underlined twice. The threat isn't from outside, it's from within, and it reaches higher than I imagined possible. Outside her window, the moon cast silver light across Havenport's tower, the same structure that had been meant to break her. Instead, it had become the first piece in a puzzle that stretched back decades and upward through the chain of command. Alexandra traced her father's handwriting with her fingertip, a silent promise forming in her mind. What began as a mission to expose training, sabotage had transformed into something far more significant, a reckoning with the shadowed heart of the institution she had sworn to serve. The cargo net tower stood rebuilt in the center of the field, reinforced steady, innocent-looking to anyone who hadn't been there 2 nights before. In the moonlight, it cast a long shadow across the empty training grounds, a reminder that some battles weren't won through strength, but through patience, preparation, and the willingness to stand alone when necessary. Alexandra closed the journal and prepared for the next phase. The first move had been made. The response would come soon enough. And when it did, she would be ready. Dawn broke over Havenport with surgical precision, slicing through the marine layer to cast long shadows across the compound. 3 days had passed since Blackwood's removal. 3 days of whispers, of sideways glances, of a base, recalibrating its understanding of power. Alexandra stood beside Chief Wilson in the maintenance bay, reviewing equipment logs on a secure terminal. The room smelled of machine oil and salt air, the constants of naval operations regardless of era or mission. 87 equipment failures in 3 years, Wilson said, scrolling through the database. 29 during Blackwood's rotations. That's 3 times the statistical average. And the victims, Alexandra asked, though she already suspected the answer. 14 women, 8 minorities, 5 men who filed complaints about training methods. Wilson's weathered face hardened, too consistent to be coincidence. Any fatalities? Wilson nodded grimly. 3 drownings during underwater exercises, 2 training injuries that resulted in fatal complications. He pulled up a separate file, including Michael Thompson. Alexandra studied the screen, eyes narrowing at a notation in the corner. Final review CMDR Westfield. The same name Sarah Daniels had mentioned one of Blackwood's calls after the hearing. Has the Admiral confirmed our meeting? 0900 tomorrow. Wilson lowered his voice. Patterson is bringing his Chief of Staff and the NCIS liaison. Whatever you've uncovered, it's got attention at the top. Good. Alexandra closed the file. I need complete access to the evidence locker. Specifically, anything preserved from Thompson's incident. Wilson hesitated. Most of that was destroyed in the storage fire. Most isn't all. Alexandra fixed him with a steady gaze. You were there that day, weren't you, when they brought him in? The chief's eyes clouded with memory. I was. Kid had so much promise. Reminded me of your father, actually, same determination. And you didn't believe it was simple drowning. 25 years maintaining dive equipment, Wilson said quietly. You develop intuition. His regulator had marks that didn't match standard wear patterns. He glanced around before continuing. I documented everything, took photos. Command said it wasn't relevant to the investigation. But you kept copies. A faint smile touched Wilson's lips. Your father taught me that. Always keep duplicates where they can't be found. He reached into his pocket and produced a small data chip. Everything I couldn't officially log. Photos, pressure readings, metal, fatigue patterns. I've been waiting for someone who could actually do something with it. Alexandra accepted the chip, tucking it securely inside her uniform. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Wilson's expression darkened. You're pulling on threads that lead to some very powerful people, the kind who make careers and reputations disappear. They already tried that with me in Afghanistan, Alexandra said. They failed. Wilson studied her for a long moment. You know, when your father died, a lot of us suspected it wasn't an accident. But suspicion isn't proof, and proof has a way of vanishing in our line of work. Not this time. Alexandra's voice carried quiet certainty. This time we're going to make it impossible to ignore. As she left the maintenance bay, Alexandra spotted Thompson sitting alone on the edge of the physical training course. His posture spoke of a man grappling with the collapse of everything he'd believed. She altered her path to approach him. Commander, he acknowledged without looking up, Your separation papers came through, she said, remaining standing. You'll process out next week. Thompson nodded numbly. 2 years before I can reapply. If any service will have me. You did the right thing. Did I? His voice cracked slightly. Blackwood's gone, but my brother's still dead. And now my career is over before it started. Alexandra considered him for a moment before sitting beside him, maintaining professional distance. Your career isn't over, Thompson. It's just changing course. He finally looked at her. What's that supposed to mean? It means I've recommended you for a position with the Naval Criminal Investigative Service. Civilian role, specialized knowledge consultant. She held his gaze steadily. They need someone who understands Bud's training from the inside. Someone who knows where to look when equipment malfunctions. Disbelief crossed his features. After what I did, because of what you did. Alexandra's tone remained even. You made a mistake. Then you chose to correct it knowing the cost. That's exactly the kind of integrity they need. Thompson absorbed this conflict, visible in his expression. Is this about finding justice for my brother? It's about preventing more deaths. Alexandra stood. The position is yours if you want it. Consider it carefully. She left him there, the weight of possibility replacing the burden of regret. Some redemptions couldn't be rushed. The afternoon brought storm clouds rolling in from the Atlantic, dark and pregnant with rain. Alexandra sat in Colonel Hargrove's office, the two of them reviewing her presentation for Admiral Patterson. You're certain about this approach? Hargrove asked, studying the data she'd compiled. Going straight at Westfield and his network. We have evidence connecting him to 5 suspicious incidents. Alexandra replied, sorting through documentation. Plus Blackwood's call logs and the irregular processing of his separation. Evidence is one thing, proof that will stand up to scrutiny is another. Hargrove leaned back in his chair. These men have spent decades building their positions. They have allies throughout the command structure. Then we'll need to be surgical. Alexandra pulled up a photograph, Commander Westfield shaking hands with a group of instructors, Blackwood among them. Every conspiracy has its weak points. Subordinates who were following orders. Witnesses who stayed silent out of fear rather than loyalty. Hargrove nodded slowly. Turner might be your angle. He doesn't have Blackwood's connections or protection. Already in motion. Sarah Daniels is meeting with him this afternoon, offering medical support for his separation process. A smile touched Hargrove's weathered face, creating an opportunity for him to unburden himself. Exactly. Alexandra closed the file. People like Turner break when isolated. He'll want to explain himself, justify his actions. All Daniels needs to do is listen. A knock at the door interrupted them. Colonel Harrison entered without waiting for acknowledgement, his expression tense. Commander Morgan, a word. His tone left no room for refusal. Alexandra exchanged a brief glance with Hargrove before following Harrison outside. They walked in silence to his office, where he closed the door firmly behind them. I received a call from Naval Special Warfare Command, Harrison said without preamble. Your meeting with Admiral Patterson has been canceled. Alexandra's expression remained neutral despite the setback. On whose authority? Vice Admiral Carmichael. Harrison's jaw tightened. He's sending Captain Reynolds to conduct an internal review instead. Arrival expected at 1600 hours today. The name registered immediately, another from Blackwood's call list, another from her father's journal. I see. No, Commander, I don't think you do. Harrison's voice dropped. Captain Reynolds was Blackwood's commanding officer during 3 deployments. They're connected. This isn't a review, it's damage control. Alexandra studied him carefully. Until now, Harrison had maintained professional distance from her investigation. This warning represented a shift. Why are you telling me this, Colonel? Harrison hesitated, internal conflict visible in his posture. 20 years ago, I served under your father during a classified operation in the Persian Gulf. He saved my team when command abandoned us. Said some missions were more important than orders. He met her gaze directly. I never forgot that. And now I'm telling you that Reynolds isn't coming alone. He's bringing a security detail and authorization to seize all evidence related to the Blackwood incident. Harrison's expression hardened. Whatever you've gathered, whatever you've documented, it needs to disappear before they arrive. Alexandra processed this information with clinical detachment. Thank you for the warning, Colonel. I never had this conversation with you. Harrison said, already turning toward his desk. And Commander, whatever you're planning, make it count. The storm broke as Alexandra left administration fat raindrops hammering against concrete and metal. She moved quickly across the compound, the urgency in her stride masked by the general rush to escape the downpour. Sarah Daniels intercepted her near the medical facility, falling into step beside her. Turner talked, she said without greeting, confirmed everything we suspected and more. The equipment tampering, the targeted accidents, the cover-ups. She passed a small recording device concealed in her palm. It goes beyond Havenport, training centers and Coronado Little Creek sites I've never even heard of. Alexandra pocketed the device. Names: a dozen instructors, 4 commanding officers, 2 admirals. Daniel's voice tightened, including Carmichael. Reynolds is coming. I know. Word's already spreading. Daniels glanced around to ensure they weren't overheard. They're moving faster than we anticipated. Then so will we. Alexandra made a swift decision. Contact Wilson. Tell him to secure everything we've gathered, all files, all evidence. Then meet me at Hargrove's in 30 minutes. What about Thompson? Get him off base. Now, tell him it's a preview of his NCIS consulting role. They parted without another word, each moving with purpose through the intensifying storm. The rain provided cover, washing away footprints, muffling conversations, blurring the lines of visibility across the compound. 28 minutes later, they converged at Hargrove's off-base residence. The retired colonel had already transformed his living room into an impromptu command center, laptops, open documents spread across tables, secure communication equipment humming quietly in the corner. Reynolds landed 10 minutes ago, he informed them as they entered. 4-man security team, direct authorization from Naval Special Warfare Command. They're starting with the evidence lockers. Let them. Alexandra removed her soaked jacket. What they're looking for isn't there anymore. Thompson stood from a chair in the corner, his expression a mixture of fear and determination. Commander, what exactly am I doing here? Daniel said something about NCIS preparation, but this doesn't look official. It's not, Alexandra acknowledged. What we're doing exists outside the official channels. I'm giving you one chance to walk away, Thompson. No repercussions, no questions asked. He straightened, chin lifting slightly. My brother deserves justice. He deserves the truth, she corrected. Justice may not be possible, not in the traditional sense. The people responsible are insulated by rank, by connections, by a system designed to protect them. Then what are we doing here? Alexandra turned to the room at large. We're changing the system. She moved to Hargrove's central table where a secure laptop displayed a series of documents. Captain Reynolds isn't just coming to seize evidence. He's coming to bury it, the same way evidence disappeared after Michael Thompson's death, the same way it vanished after my father's accident during Desert Storm. She opened a digital file scans from her father's journal. For decades, a network of officers has maintained control over who succeeds in special operations. They eliminated threats, removed dissenters, preserved their vision of what the SEALs should be. My father discovered it in '91. I encountered it in Afghanistan. And now we've traced it directly to Havenport. The question, Hargrove added, is what we do with this information. Official channels are compromised. The chain of command leads directly to those involved. So we go outside it, Daniel suggested. NCIS, Inspector General, even Congress. All options they've prepared for, Alexandra countered. Reports get buried, investigations, stall witnesses are reassigned or discredited. Then what? Thompson asked, frustration evident in his voice. Alexandra's expression remained calm, but her eyes burned with cold intensity. We force their hand, create a situation where they have no choice but to respond publicly. She pulled up a new document on the screen, a press release template for Naval Special Warfare Command. Admiral Patterson holds a monthly press briefing on operational readiness. The next one is scheduled for 0900 tomorrow. You can't possibly expect to present this evidence there, Wilson objected. Security would never allow it. We don't need to be there, Alexandra replied. We just need our evidence to be. She turned to Hargrove. Your Pentagon contacts, how current are they? Active and reliable. A slow smile spread across his weathered face as understanding dawned. You want to bypass the chain of command entirely. I want to ensure that every senior officer, every journalist, and every congressional liaison in that room receives our complete documentation simultaneously. No chance to intercept, no opportunity to prepare counters. Daniels leaned forward. Even if we could distribute the evidence, they'd simply deny everything. Call it a disgruntled officer's fabrication. Not if we have confession. Alexandra nodded toward the recording device Daniels had provided. Turner's statement provides context, but we need more. We need someone at the center of the conspiracy. Blackwood, Thompson said. Exactly. Wilson shook his head. He'd never talk. Not willingly. He won't need to. Alexandra pulled up another file, a complete personnel dossier on Sergeant Ryan Blackwood. Every person has pressure points. Family they want to protect. Ambitions they refuse to surrender. Secrets they need to keep hidden. She highlighted a section of the file. Blackwood has all three. This is starting to sound like blackmail, Thompson said uneasily. It's leverage, Alexandra corrected. The same technique they've used for years to maintain their system. We're simply turning their methods against them. She stood straight, addressing the room with quiet authority. I'm not asking any of you to compromise your principles. What we're doing exists in a gray area, not illegal, but certainly not conventional. If anyone wants to step back, now is the time. Well, silence answered her, determination reflected in each face. Then let's begin. The next 6 hours unfolded with military precision. Wilson and Daniels compiled and organized evidence, medical records, maintenance logs, testimony from affected personnel. Thompson worked with Hargrove to create secure communications channels for evidence distribution. Alexandra prepared for the most delicate operation, extracting confession from Blackwood. By midnight, the storm had passed, leaving behind a world washed clean and electric with possibility. Alexandra sat alone on Hargrove's porch, reviewing her approach one final time. You remind me of him, you know, Hargrove said, emerging from the house to join her. Your father had that same look before critical operations. Total focus, absolute clarity. Did he know, Alexandra asked, about how far the corruption reached? Hargrove settled into a chair beside her joints, protesting the movement. He was beginning to put it together. That's what made him dangerous to them. He studied her profile in the dim light. Just as you are now. The difference is I'm not alone, she closed her notebook, and I'm not operating within their system. That's what worries me. Hargrove's voice softened. These men destroyed your father's reputation after his death, made him appear reckless, unstable. They'll do worse to you if they can. Let them try. No bravado in her tone, just calm certainty. Everything we've prepared has redundancies. Multiple distribution channels, evidence secured in multiple locations. Even if they stop me, the truth still reaches Patterson. And if Patterson is part of it, Alexandra turned to face him fully, then it reaches everyone else in that briefing room. The press, the congressional liaisons, too many points of exposure for them to contain. Hargrove nodded slowly, satisfied with her answer. There's something you should have, he said, reaching into his pocket. He withdrew a small object that gleamed dully in the porch light, a sealed trident pin worn with age and use. Your father's, he explained, placing it in her palm. He earned it during a time when the seal stood for something pure, duty, excellence, integrity, before the politics and power struggles corrupted the core. Alexandra closed her fingers around the trident, feeling its weight physical and symbolic. After tomorrow, there will be no going back, Hargrove warned. Whatever career you might have had within the system will be finished. I never wanted a career within their system, she replied. I wanted to fix it. Dawn approached like a tactical operation, methodical, inevitable, precise. Alexandra parked 2 blocks from Blackwood's off-base apartment, reviewing his recent movements one final time. Since his dismissal, he'd maintained a predictable routine: morning run, at 0545 coffee, at a local diner by 0700 return home to await further contact from his naval special warfare connections. She checked her watch. 0535. Right on schedule, Blackwood emerged from his apartment building, dressed for his run, expression set in bitter determination. She allowed him to establish his pattern, waiting until he rounded the corner before approaching his apartment. The lock yielded to skills honed during joint operations with intelligence units. Inside the apartment told its own story. Sparse furnishings, military precision in the arrangement of possessions, walls adorned with commendations and team photographs. A life defined by service, by belonging, by identity. Alexandra moved silently through the space, confirming what intelligence had already suggested. A laptop open on the kitchen table, multiple phones charging beside it. A half-packed duffel bag in the bedroom, preparations for rapid departure. She settled into a chair in the darkened living room and waited. 43 minutes later, the front door opened. Blackwood entered sweat-soaked from his run water bottle in hand. He froze when he sensed her presence, instincts still sharp despite his dismissal. Breaking and entering, Commander. His voice carried forced casualness. Not very officer-like. Neither is sabotaging equipment and assaulting superior officers, she replied evenly. Yet here we are. Blackwood reached for the light switch. Alexandra remained seated as illumination revealed her position. What do you want? He made no move to approach or retreat, assessing the situation with trained precision. To offer you a choice. His laugh held no humor. Little late for that. You've already destroyed my career. Your actions destroyed your career, she corrected. I simply exposed them. Semantics. He moved to the kitchen, deliberately turning his back on her, a show of contempt. Whatever you're selling, I'm not interested. Alexandra remained calm. Not even if it concerns Operation Kingfisher. The water bottle froze halfway to his lips. His shoulders tightened imperceptibly. I don't know what you're talking about. 3 years ago, classified SEAL deployment to eastern Afghanistan. Official mission, high-value target extraction. Actual outcome massacre of 16 civilians when intelligence proved faulty. Alexandra recited facts from memory. The operation was scrubbed from official records. The team was separated and reassigned. No investigation, no accountability. Blackwood turned slowly to face her. Where did you get that information? The same place I found details about your unauthorized use of combat drugs during the operation. The same source that documented your execution of a wounded teenager who witnessed the team's actions. His expression hardened. You're bluffing. Without a word, Alexandra removed a small device from her pocket and placed it on the coffee table. At the press of a button, an audio recording began to play. Blackwood's voice, thick with stress, reporting to a superior officer. Fragmentary phrases cut through the static. Civilians in the target zone. Intelligence completely wrong. Situation deteriorating. Had to eliminate security risks. She stopped the recording. Not bluffing. Blackwood's composure cracked. Where did you get that? My father kept records. Captain Jonathan Morgan. He documented everything, including operations that were later buried, including the system that protected men like you while eliminating those who questioned it. Understanding dawned in his eyes. That's what this is about, revenge for your father. Justice, she corrected, for everyone the system has destroyed to protect itself. Blackwood laughed bitterly. Lady, you have no idea what you're up against. This isn't about a few training accidents or some outdated ideas about who belongs in special operations. This is about power, who has it, who keeps it, who decides how it's used. I know exactly what I'm against, Alexandra replied. Men who believe they're above accountability. Men who think their service entitles them to operate outside the very laws they claim to defend. She rose from her seat, moving with deliberate calm. In approximately 90 minutes, Admiral Patterson will begin his monthly press briefing at Naval Special Warfare Command. In attendance will be 37 journalists, 4 congressional representatives, and 12 senior naval officers. She placed a document on the table between them. At precisely 09:01 p.m. scene, each of them will receive a comprehensive dossier documenting 20 years of systematic corruption within SEAL training programs. Names, dates, incidents, including Operation Kingfisher, including Michael Thompson's death, including my father's. Blackwood's face paled. You're bluffing. That would destroy the entire SEAL program. It would clean it, she corrected. Remove the cancer while preserving the body. They'll stop you. They can't. Alexandra's confidence was absolute. The evidence is already positioned for automatic distribution. Multiple channels, multiple redundancies. Nothing short of a nationwide communications blackout could prevent it. Blackwood sank into a chair, the full implications washing over him. What do you want from me? Your testimony, on record, fully detailed. Names, operations, the entire network. Every commander who covered up incidents, every admiral who protected the system. They'd kill me. They'll try, she acknowledged, unless you have insurance like the complete documentation you're going to provide us. Blackwood studied her calculation, replacing shock. And if I refuse, then the distribution proceeds as planned, including the Kingfisher audio. You face military justice alone while your superiors distance themselves and find another scapegoat. The room fell silent as Blackwood weighed his options. Finally, he asked, "What guarantees do I have?" "The same one I'm operating under," Alexandra replied. "The truth distributed too widely to be contained protects everyone who acknowledges it, denies protection to anyone who fights it." Outside, the morning sun climbed higher, throwing bands of light across the apartment floor. Time ticking forward, options narrowing with each passing moment. "I want immunity," Blackwood said finally. "Not mine to grant," Alexandra answered truthfully. "But your cooperation will be documented and submitted to appropriate authorities." Another long silence. "Then how much time do I have?" 47 minutes until the first distribution phase begins." Blackwood exhaled slowly, defeat and calculation mingling in his expression. "Get your recorder ready, Commander. It's a longer story than you think." Exactly 38 minutes later, Alexandra exited Blackwood's apartment, a secured data device containing his full confession, tucked safely in her uniform. The morning had brightened into brilliant clarity, the storm's aftermath leaving the world scrubbed and redefined. She made a single call. "It's done. Proceed with distribution." At Naval Special Warfare Command Headquarters, Admiral Patterson's press briefing proceeded with choreographed precision. Operational readiness statistics, deployment updates, carefully vetted questions from pre-approved journalists, until every device in the room, phones, tablets, laptops, simultaneously received the same encrypted file. As screens illuminated with evidence accumulated over decades, the Admiral's prepared remarks faltered, then ceased entirely. Across Havenport Naval Base, Captain Reynolds stormed through administration's security team in tow, demanding access to all files related to the Blackwood incident. He found Colonel Harrison waiting calmly in his office, a single envelope on his otherwise empty desk. "You're too late, Captain," Harrison said simply. "The truth doesn't need permission to emerge. It just needs one person brave enough to speak it." Evening settled over Havenport Bay, the training grounds quiet in the fading light. The cargo net tower stood silhouetted against the sunset, repaired and reinforced, a monument to resilience rather than intimidation. Alexandra Morgan walked the perimeter one last time, her father's trident pin now fastened into her uniform. Not officially authorized, but in this moment of transition, such details seemed irrelevant. "I thought I'd find you here," Hargrove said, approaching from the administration building. His expression was solemn but satisfied. "It's done. The Secretary of the Navy has ordered a full investigation into Naval Special Warfare Command. Independent oversight, congressional visibility, complete transparency." Alexandra nodded, unsurprised. "And the fallout? 4 admirals suspended pending investigation, 12 commanding officers relieved of duty, system-wide review of all training fatalities for the past decade." Hargrove's weathered face showed grim satisfaction. "The walls are coming down, Commander. All of them. And my position, that's—" Hargrove hesitated. "Complicated. Admiral Patterson has requested you be assigned to lead the training reform initiative. Full authority, direct reporting to SEC Navy oversight." Alexandra raised an eyebrow. "Patterson, I wouldn't have expected that. Turns out he's been trying to address these issues for years but kept hitting institutional resistance. Your evidence provided what he needed to act decisively." Hargrove smiled slightly. "He also mentioned your father. Said Jonathan Morgan tried to warn them 20 years ago, and they should have listened then." Alexandra turned her gaze back to the tower, processing this unexpected outcome. "I didn't do this for advancement." "No," Hargrove agreed. "You did it for justice. But sometimes the best way to ensure justice continues is to accept the authority to implement it." From across the compound, a group of recruits approached the training area for evening exercises. Among them, Alexandra noticed subtle changes already taking effect: more diversity in the ranks, instructors maintaining professional distance rather than intimidating presence. "They're watching you," Hargrove noted quietly. "Not just the recruits, every woman in the service, every officer who values integrity over tradition. They're waiting to see what happens next." Alexandra touched her father's trident, feeling its weight against her uniform. "Then we'd better make it count." As darkness settled over Havenport, lights illuminated the training grounds one by one. Alexandra remained at the tower base, watching as a new class of recruits tackled the obstacle course. Each face determined, each effort honored with fair assessment, rather than predetermined judgment. The system hadn't been perfect before. It wouldn't be perfect now, but it would be better, more worthy of the sacrifice demanded from those who served within it. And sometimes that was enough. In her quarters later that night, Alexandra opened her father's journal one final time, adding a single entry beneath his last words: "The threat from within has been exposed. The system is changing. Your warning was finally heard. Rest now knowing your sacrifice mattered." She closed the journal and placed it on her desk beside a new set of orders, her assignment to lead the training reform initiative across all special operations commands. The challenge ahead was immense, the resistance certain, the outcome far from guaranteed. But as she had proven on that tower days before, some battles weren't won through strength alone. They were won through persistence, through principles, through the courage to stand firm when everything around you threatened to collapse. Outside her window, Havenport continued its eternal rhythm waves against the shore wind through the training grounds, the steady heartbeat of an institution older than any individual within it. An institution worth saving, worth reforming, worth the price paid by those who loved it enough to demand it be better. Alexandra Morgan watched the moonlight trace silver patterns across the base and allowed herself just for a moment to feel the weight of victory. Not over individuals, but over the corruption that had threatened the core of something valuable. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new resistance, new battles to fight with evidence and integrity rather than force. But tonight, in this quiet moment of transition, she recognized what her father had understood all those years ago. Some wars are won in dramatic firefights under foreign skies. Others are won in quiet rooms where courage means speaking truth regardless of consequence. Both require the same essential quality: the willingness to stand alone if necessary for something greater than yourself.